Hello everybody. Today I wanted to make a video sort of demoing my second Bitcoin mining rig. This won't be a review video, this won't be a tutorial or anything of that nature, just a high level look at this build with some notes, namely about the case. So first of all, let's talk about the build inside. I'll say that if you watched my previous video, you might want to skip this because it is dreadfully similar. Inside there's a BioStar TB250BTC motherboard. For the RAM, we have 8 gigabytes of Ballistics 2400 MHz DDR4, Corsair AXI 1500i, and a Kingston 120 gig SSD. The processor is a Pentium G4560, and as you can see here, for the mining power, currently 4 of the 6 slots on this case are filled with 1080 Ti's, 3 Asus, and 1 MSI. And it has been running solid for about 36 hours. Let's talk about the case for a second. With this case, you will get 6 120mm fans. There's 3 in the front. There's 3 more in the back. If you compare this to my previous build, where you can see that my handiwork is not that good, I decided to take the easy way out and buy a pre-built. So this took me about 30 minutes to put together, the case only, none of the computer hardware. In comparison, it's a lot lighter. These right here, posts are metal, whereas these are some sort of plastic surrounded by supporting metal. That's what they drive the pre-drilled rivets into. Plastic on the outside, metal on the inside, which is sort of a relief because I think in general when you're moving this you're going to be grabbing it right here, and you don't want this thing breaking while you're moving it. And as mentioned, it does have pre-cut holes for everything, so you don't need a drill really, you just need a screwdriver, and mine at least came with an Allen wrench because these screws, as well as the ones down here, are hex screws or Allen screws. That was a sort of a relief. So let's talk about criticism with this case for a minute. My first point of criticism is this campy front panel. So I hooked this up for about 2 minutes before I realized exactly how awful it was. So when I bought this, I was hoping that this would plug into the motherboard via USB header and maybe convey real useful stats, but in reality it's more of just a selling gimmick. So with this, you get these heat sensors here. So you have a system, hard drive, and CPU, and you're meant to put these on the heat sinks and heat dissipators and get sort of a reading of how hot that piece of hardware is. Now, I did turn it on. I did wrap my finger around the tip of one of these, and I did notice that it did show that the temperature was going up. But beyond that, as far as reporting, which you have to cycle through the modes to view the system, the CPU, and HDD temps, you have an alarm, which I have no idea what that does. If it's just, I mean, it must just be a beep. So unless this is near you, unlike in the garage like mine, chances are you will not hear it. And then lastly, fan speed, because it also comes with correlated fan plugs, 3-pin fan plugs here, so that I guess it doesn't react to the temperatures, it just allows you to view them and then also choose one of 3 fan speeds. Now I gotta imagine this costs some amount of money to quote-unquote engineer, to install, to test, and my preference would be to just remove that altogether because it is of little help, and lower the price nominally. I'd rather let the motherboard monitor temperatures and adjust fan curves accordingly. Same with the graphics cards. And as for these auxiliary fans across the outside, those are hooked up to Molex, and I really just want those to run at full tilt 24/7. My next point of criticism, and this is probably my strongest point of criticism with this case, is that the supporting structure for the graphics cards are just these 2 beams here, which you have 3 slots where you can move them, here, here, and here. to support the back of the graphics card. What I would really love, and you can see here on these risers, there's a screw hole here, there's a screw hole here, would be either pre-cut, which I know would be tough because these might vary from riser to riser, or just a piece of wood going across the side that I can drill these down, because I'd like for these risers to be an extension of the case rather than an extension of the card. And also with that, it would allow more easily for various graphics cards to be installed, because every graphics card is going to be standard. It's going to have the PCI 16 here, and it's always going to screw in the same place. But with this method, I'm kind of pigeonholed into buying graphics cards that are the same size or meet at the same points here, or accommodating various other size graphics cards. Plus, it would be nice if you're troubleshooting or one burnt out, you could just unscrew here, pop the latch there, and just lift it up and move it away, versus what you see here, which is also part of the reason why the cable management is so poor right now. Because when you're troubleshooting or moving things in and out or whatever it may be, building it, it's a lot harder to manage these cables when you have to extend the riser out, plug it into the graphics card, and then move it back in and install it, versus if the riser was stationary and you were just plugging the card into that. My next point of criticism is if we look down the top, and granted I have one of the largest power supplies here, there's very little room for two power supplies. In fact, you'll see that my power supply that I currently have installed is occupying more than half of the width of the case, leaving very little room for another. And the way this case is set up, it's set up such that you can screw the power supply into this here, and I don't want to move this cable too much, but there's a screw behind there, and there's another screw hole there, although I couldn't get that one to line up. And with this configuration, you are left running the cords through the middle. So you not only have to have room for the width of your power supply, but you also have to have room to have the cables coming out and to manage them to whatever degree you choose to. The 1500 watt power supply I have here is the largest you'll get for the regular consumer market, because beyond this you're looking at server power supplies. And the reason that is because, and of course this 1500X here is indicative of it being a 1500 watt power supply, and regular plugins and houses are meant to peak at 1800 amps of power throughput, and for constant, which is what this would be because it's running 24/7, it peaks at 1500. So anything higher than this really is approaching dangerous, unreliable. The last point of criticism, and as mentioned with this hole, and some more with where the motherboard plugs in, and of course not really going to be able to demo that. Some of the holes, pre-cut holes, don't line up perfectly, and you can see, kind of unrelated, there's no riser here. On the far end of the motherboard, there's no riser, which is where the 24 pin plugs in from the power supply. Which means you are either plugging the power supply into the motherboard and bowing it, or you're supporting it in some other fashion to get it plugged in. And I don't really like that. But some of the holes don't line up. I had a really difficult time getting this I/O shield to install, because I had this panel installed, I had the I/O shield installed, and I was trying to slide the motherboard into place, and it wouldn't align. The I/O shield was pushing it too far out. What I ended up doing was mounting the motherboard, screwing it in, and then later installing this whole side of the case, and then letting the screws, as I screwed them in, push the I/O shield into the motherboard. And so it ended up working out, but for a brief time I was like, nah. But it does look a lot better installed. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is sort of a bit of a troubleshooting point, is that I have not had great luck with the power adapters that come with the risers. Now every riser that I've seen so far Looks very similar to this, and it has a 6-pin power input here, as well as USB 3.0 for data throughput. And they all come with this adapter, so you can adapt SATA to power. And through 2 different builds, I've had my risers getting fried, and what I've sort of tried to isolate the variables, the common denominator is always this adapter. Now that said, I have friends that are actively using these with no problem, but I will say that I refuse to use these anymore. In fact, this is my riser graveyard from failed risers that all were using this. If you run out of 6 pins coming straight from the power supply, such as that one there, what I've found to be reliable are these here Molex to 6-pin. Now bear in mind that you are going to have to forfeit 2 of your Molex adapters, or Molex plugs, to power one 6-pin. And your next question is probably going to be, well, if I have 4 Molex ports like I have on this line, can I hook up 2 risers to it? I tried that and I could never get the graphics cards to show up in Device Manager or be recognized by the computer in any fashion. So I have 2 graphics cards running through power directly from the power supply, and then I have 2 that are getting power from 2 different lines of Molex, one back there and one over here. I don't know if it's just me. Like I said, I've got friends that are using these reliably, but maybe it is related to the power consumption of the graphics card itself. So that's it. That's my mining rig 2.0, considerably smaller, considerably lighter, and soon to be filled in fully with graphics cards. So hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.